something rather unusual happened at Sandringham. While Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor has been keeping an extremely low profile inside Wood Farm Cottage following his arrest last month, a car quietly pulled up to the property one morning. Out stepped one of the most powerful figures in the royal household, the Lord Chamberlain himself, Richard Benyon. Now that raised a few eyebrows, because Benyon is not someone who casually drops in for tea. He oversees around 1,200 members of the royal household staff and acts as a key link between the king and Parliament. So when his car was spotted leaving Andrew's cottage after several hours inside, people immediately started asking a simple question. Why was the king's most senior courtier visiting Andrew right now, especially after King Charles had just imposed a strict set of rules on his younger brother? To understand why the visit caused such curiosity, we have to look at Andrew's current situation at Sandringham. Since his arrest last month on suspicion of misconduct in public office, Andrew has been living quietly at Wood Farm Cottage on the Sandringham estate in Norfolk. The property itself carries some emotional history within the family. It is the same modest farmhouse where Prince Philip spent much of his retirement and eventually lived out his final years. Compared with the much grander Royal Lodge at Windsor, where Andrew lived for years, Wood Farm is considerably smaller and far more isolated. Andrew arrived there after spending 11 hours in police custody at Aylsham Police Station. When he left the station on the evening of his 66th birthday, he reportedly slouched down in the back seat of the car that took him back to Sandringham. Since that moment, there have been no confirmed public sightings of him at all. Instead of the busy schedule he once kept as a working royal, his days now appear to be extremely quiet. His daughters, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, have remained out of the spotlight, and Sarah Ferguson has also kept a very low profile. As a result, Andrew's daily life has reportedly become rather lonely inside that small cottage on the Sandringham estate. And then there are the rules. According to the newspaper and several other British outlets, King Charles has imposed a fairly strict set of conditions on Andrew while he remains on the estate. One of the more surprising ones involves horse riding. Andrew used to ride frequently when he lived at Royal Lodge in Windsor, but he has reportedly been told that riding around the estate right now would be a bad look, given the ongoing police investigation. There are also claims that Andrew cannot leave the Sandringham estate without permission. Even more interestingly, he is said to require a chaperone if he does leave the grounds. Visitors to Wood Farm must reportedly be approved in advance as well. In other words, Andrew's life right now seems tightly controlled. That is part of what made Richard Benyon's appearance so notable. Benyon, as Lord Chamberlain, is the most senior official in the royal household. His responsibilities include overseeing the entire household operation and acting as a senior liaison between the monarch and the House of Lords. He is not typically the person sent to deal with everyday matters. When his car was seen leaving Wood Farm, after spending several hours inside with Andrew, reporters quickly started speculating about what might have been discussed. Former BBC royal correspondent Jenny Bond offered one possible explanation when speaking to the press. She suggested the visit may have been arranged by King Charles himself, rather than the king meeting Andrew directly. Bond said, "There are a number of courtiers who could deal with Andrew, and it may be that the Lord Chamberlain was sent to sort out a few things on the king's behalf." She also added that visits like this may reflect how the relationship between the two brothers is now operating. In her words, it appears strictly formal and decidedly distant. That idea has been reinforced by what happened just a few days earlier. King Charles was actually staying at Sandringham at the same time Andrew was there. In fact, the two men were reportedly only about 2 miles apart for part of the weekend. The king had arrived at his Norfolk estate on Friday and spent several days there. On Sunday morning, he was photographed walking to the traditional church service at St Mary Magdalene Church on the Sandringham estate. At one point on Saturday, he was seen driving around the estate roads, reportedly passing within a short distance of Wood Farm. But the two brothers did not meet. A witness speaking to The Sun said, "The king left Sandringham and was driving towards Wood Farm, which is only 2 miles away and only about 5 minutes by car." Even so, there was no visit. The cottage itself is far removed from the large royal residences people typically picture. Wood Farm is known for being simple and somewhat secluded, surrounded by countryside and woodland. Prince Philip chose to live there during his retirement precisely because it offered privacy away from palace life. For Andrew, however, the isolation may feel rather different. Since moving there after his arrest, his movements have reportedly been very limited. With the rules imposed by the king and the ongoing police investigation hanging over him, there is little indication that his situation will change anytime soon. The visit from Richard Benyon may simply have involved administrative matters. It could have been about Andrew's living arrangements, his future move to Marsh Farm, or communication between Andrew and the wider royal household. The exact details of the conversation have not been made public, but the fact that such a senior courtier was sent instead of the king himself has not gone unnoticed. It reinforces the sense that any contact between Andrew and the centre of the royal household is now being handled through official channels rather than personal visits. And as the investigation continues, that careful distance may remain in place for some time. For Andrew, life at Wood Farm seems to have settled into a quiet routine of waiting. Waiting to see how the investigation develops, waiting to see whether further allegations emerge, and waiting to see what his long-term future within the royal family might look like. The monarchy itself is also watching closely. As more documents related to Epstein continue to surface, there is a sense within royal circles that new information could appear at any time. Several commentators have suggested that this uncertainty is exactly why the king is keeping such a controlled approach to the situation. For now, Andrew remains largely out of sight at that small farmhouse on the Sandringham estate. But the unexpected visit from the Lord Chamberlain has reminded royal watchers that even when Andrew is living quietly behind the scenes, important conversations about his future may still be happening behind closed doors. And here is something I am curious about. Do you think King Charles is handling this situation the right way by keeping such a visible distance from his brother? Or do you think at some point the two of them will eventually be seen together again? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you enjoy following royal news and behind-the-scenes stories like this, make sure you subscribe so you do not miss the next update.